Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to my channel. It's been a while, but yes, I am back with another 50th anniversary audio commentary. And tonight, I will be doing the 1972 Bob Fosse multi-award-winning classic Cabaret, starring Liza Minnelli, Michael York, and Joel Grey as the master of ceremonies. And if this is, of course, based on the Broadway musical, which has a number of sources which we'll be talking about throughout the film. But just to let everybody know, uh, Cabaret is available on HBO Max. So if you want to go over there and watch it with me that way, or it is available for rental on Amazon and other platforms as well. But if you have HBO Max, you're all set up and ready to go. So go ahead and go there. I'll just give everybody about 60 seconds, maybe 90 seconds here. And I don't have much of an intro. I mean, this is going to be a 2-hour commentary. So a lot of what I'm going to be saying is going to be, talked about into the commentary. But I will confess before we get started here that this was a film that took me many, many years to appreciate, to fully appreciate. My parents had a copy of it on VHS, and I would always see snippets of it without actually watching the whole movie. Now, I'm actually glad that I didn't watch the whole movie as a kid, because it probably would have went just beyond me, and I probably would have not have appreciated it more as if I watched it as an adult. And I didn't see it for the first time from beginning to end, maybe when I was in my mid 30s, which wasn't very long ago. But I understood at that time how this film had changed the genre of musicals. It was something different. It was something unique. For 1972, this was a musical that actually appealed to people that did not like musicals, which is an extraordinary achievement on its own. And but like I said, it was a massive hit in theaters, not as big a hit as The Godfather. And we'll be talking about The Godfather more when we reach that commentary. And yes, my 50th anniversary audio commentary for The Godfather will definitely be next month in March. I got to read the book, and I got the Blu-ray set all ready to go. But yeah, that's going to be massive, because we all know how long the Godfather is in terms of runtime. So I need to figure out how to fill up that amount of runtime with information, especially on a film that practically everybody has seen and everybody knows by heart. But of course, Cabaret, directed by Bob Fosse and written by J. Preston Allen, was the movie that gave The Godfather the most competition back in 1972. Both films got 10 Academy Award nominations. And even though The Godfather won Best Picture, it was Cabaret which walked away with the majority of the Oscars, winning 8 in total, including the upset that was Best Director when Bob Fosse won Best Director over Francis Ford Coppola. Now, don't worry, Godfather fans, because Coppola would win for part 2 in a couple of years. But at the time, that was considered a massive upset, because Francis Ford Coppola was winning all the polls at that time. But trust me, when we talk about The Godfather next month, we'll be going to places I've never been to before, because that is a very complex film, and it's one that I try to watch every 3 years, and yet I still feel like there's not much more to say about it, and yet there's a lot to say about it. But anyway, The Godfather will be in March. But tonight we're going to be watching Cabaret. So I hope everybody's ready to go. I have the screen paused at Allied Artists Pictures Corporation and ABC Pictures Corporation present. So I'll give everybody just a few more seconds here. So as you can see, this movie was not released by a major studio. It was actually released by a couple of corporations, including Allied Artists, who had released a bunch of comedies in the 40s and 50s, but they were most famous for releasing Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1956, directed by Don Siegel, which I personally believe is the best science fiction movie of that decade, in a decade that had plenty of them. But anyway, we're going to get started here on the count of three. 3, 2, 1, and play. And we have started Cabaret, an ABC Pictures Corporation production. And yes, that is the television broadcasting company that served as one of the financiers of this movie. Liza Minnelli and Michael York, Helmut Grimm. I probably screwed that up. I'm not okay. I'm going to be doing lousy German impressions probably throughout this commentary. Hopefully not, but anyway, there's that great title for Cabaret there, and these are the opening credits. So this film has a pretty maybe not convoluted history in terms of its genesis, but at the same time, it goes all the way back to the 1930s in Berlin. It's set in Berlin in 1931. And music by John Kander. Like I said, this is based on the 1966 Broadway show, lyrics by Fred Ebb. But everything takes place in Berlin in 1931, based on the play by John van Druten and the stories of Christopher Isherwood. And Christopher Isherwood, he was a real writer, and he wrote about his experiences in Berlin in the 1930s, and those were published in later in the decade. And then in 1951, his stories was adapted as a play called I Am a Camera. And I'm glad I brought that up right when Jeffrey Unsworth's cinematography credit comes up here, because one of the great things about this movie, among many great things, is Jeffrey Unsworth's cinematography. It is epic. He of course shot 2001: A Space Odyssey for Stanley Kubrick just a couple of years before. But here we are introduced to Joel Grey as the master of ceremonies, and he's breaking the fourth wall immediately by looking directly in the camera and actually speaking directly to the audience. Will come on, bienvenue, welcome. And thus starts the crazy, insane, unique world that is Bob Fosse's Cabaret. And already we see a mannequin smoking. I mean, we're gonna have some fun tonight, I'll tell you. So at any rate, this of course is set in Berlin in 1931, and based on the writings of a man by the name of Christopher Isherwood. In this movie, he's personified by Michael York under a different character name. And he talked about his experiences with a cabaret singer by the name of Gene Ross, and how they were very much party goers. They were bohemian. They were, very bisexual. I mean, Gene Ross would sing in like lesbian clubs, and they would do like the gay nightlife circuit, where there were a lot of there was a bit of a seediness about this atmosphere, but at the same time, there's also something radiant about its decadence, because automatically we're dropped into this shifting of locations, where we're in this club called the Kit Kat Club, which we'll eventually find out is the Kit Kat Club. And we follow this guy coming off the train who we don't know who is yet. But at the same time, what we're seeing here is a juxtaposition of, somebody that's coming brand new to Berlin, not really fully realizing what's going on. This is basically taking place at the end of the Weimar Republic in 1931, because what happened is that after World War I, the war to end all wars, basically, which ended in 1918 with Germany surrendering. They were, there were many years where they had, difficulty getting back on top in terms of politics and in terms of economy. And it wasn't, and it wasn't until 1924 where they were finally able to get everything back together and straight as far as, and then they started experiencing a huge 5-year period of growth. And now, so this is set basically right when the Republic is about to fall to the Nazi Party in 1933, which basically, approximately 2 years after the events in this movie, Adolf Hitler would become the chancellor of the Nazi Party and essentially take over the country to the worst kind of crimes against humanity you could ever expect. But this is set in a time where people weren't really paying attention to it, and it was just something that was like creeping up and like coming out of the gutters, just taking over the city like a disease almost. But a lot of what you see here in the stage in the Kit Kat Club is very, very Bob Fosse. Now, Fosse was a choreographer. He was a Broadway director and choreographer who had started out doing shows. And eventually, the movie that sort of put him on the map, even though he didn't direct it, was the 1958 version of Damn Yankees, which he did with his wife, Gwynne Verdon, who was a Broadway star. But what happened is that musicals were, huge in the 1950s and 60s. The Rodgers and Hammersteins, the big road show productions that the studios invested so much money in. But unfortunately, with Vietnam, those once forms of escapism were considered, passe and not okay. We just had a flash of Liza Minnelli, the star of the movie. A very unusual introduction, but here again, I think it's one of many things that makes this movie stand out among not only films of its genre, but of course, films in general. It's just that's not a normal introduction to the star of the movie, where she almost appears as a background player, and then we finally do meet Sally, here played by Liza Minnelli. She's, of course, the daughter of Judy Garland. And she had started out, she had done a couple movies before Cabaret. She was 25 when she shot this movie, but a lot of people hadn't heard her sing yet on film. But she had done a couple movies like an Otto Preminger movie in 1970. I can't remember the name of it. I know Junie Moon is in the title. I can't think of it. But in 1969, she did a movie called The Sterile Cuckoo, which put her on the map. And it was also in 1969 that we got Bob Fosse's very first film, which he made for Universal, and reportedly almost collapsed the studio. I don't know if that's an exaggeration or not. But the 1969 film Sweet Charity, that was based on a Broadway show which had Gwynne Verdon, here again, Fosse's wife, on the stage. And in the movie version, they cast Shirley MacLaine in the title role. And I just saw Sweet Charity for the first time only a week ago. It was the only Bob Fosse film I had not seen. I had seen his other films, which include Lenny, All That Jazz, and Star 80, but I hadn't seen Sweet Charity. And unfortunately, I have to admit that it's my least favorite Bob Fosse film so far. If I was going to actually do a ranking, Sweet Charity would be at the bottom, but that doesn't mean that I disliked it necessarily. It has a lot of those trademark Fosse dance sequences and choreography that are his hallmark. And Shirley MacLaine is dazzling in the movie, to be perfectly honest. Although the movie is very, very long. Every scene, it feels like it's taken to twice its length, and I don't and I don't think that that was altogether necessary. But also, um, Sweet Charity came out, here again when the musical was pretty much deemed to be dead, because it's funny because I had just recently acquired the Columbia Classics 4K set, which includes the 1968 Best Picture winner Oliver from 1968. I had just rewatched that film, and that's really the last of those old-fashioned, old Hollywood type of musicals, which were blown up to epic lengths, and they would have like intermissions or entr'actes, and uh, full-blown prologues with music and everything. And some of them are admittedly great. I mean, but at the same time, they made so many of them that a lot of them sort of like blended together. And Sweet Charity, while it has that Fosse touch, um it unfortunately, it's kind of, it's just not very memorable. I mean, I didn't particularly care for the music, even though I like the music in other Fosse films, particularly Cabaret. Um, and like I said, it was just so long. It was 149 minutes, and of course, Sweet Charity bombed at the box office. It was a $20 million production, and it only made $8 million. And of course, that made anybody would be nervous to hire Bob Fosse after he just made this massive musical bomb that nearly bankrupted and ruined Universal Studios, according to some sources. But with Sweet Charity out of the way, I want to say that this dance, well, yes, this number with Liza Minnelli, Mein Hair, which was um, brought to the forefront here in the movie, is dazzling. It's awesome. It's one of my favorite musical sequences in any movie. And the Bob Fosse choreography here, under the lights and the smoky atmosphere of this club, it's sensational. It's amazing. And Bob Fosse, he had grown up in like strip clubs and cat houses, and so he was used to seeing many different angles of the female body, I guess you could say. He had I mean, of course, he was a massive womanizer, and I think that of course he, like a lot of artists, he took advantage of his position to sleep with a lot of women. Um, One thing I'm going to mention several times throughout this commentary is, if it was produced for FX, and it's currently on Hulu, but there's an 8-part documentary series starring Sam Rockwell as Bob Fosse and Michelle Williams as Gwen Verdon, and it's called Fosse Verdon, an 8-part documentary series, and it's on Hulu, which showcases basically their entire relationship from when they start working on Damn Yankees, and then they go into their there are other Broadway shows that they did together, and how Gwen Verdon was kind of sidelined for many of these film adaptations in favor of A-list stars, which also put strains in their relationship. I mean, they had a daughter together and everything. But it basically showcases their entire relationship from when they meet in 1958 for Damn Yankees up until Bob Fosse's death in 1987, when he died at the age of 60. He wasn't that old when he passed away. I mean, he had already, his health was exacerbated by constant smoking. In fact, one of the things, if you watch that docuseries, practically every second that Sam Rockwell is on screen, not all every second, but almost every second, he has a cigarette. He has a lit cigarette in his mouth, and the implication is that Bob Fosse actually chain smoked filterless cigarettes. Uh, when he did his choreography. I mean, I mean, I I hope the guy didn't cough too much. I hope he was able to breathe during a lot of this. But and he was also known infamously as a perfectionist. So you can imagine, a lot of these a lot of these dancers and a lot of these singers that he worked with on Broadway and in films, you know, probably, they probably looked at him as quite the character, and yet at the same time, they knew that if they were directed by Bob Fosse, that they were going to get their best work. He was really, especially in 1972, after he had made Cabaret, he became the most well-known director in the world, practically next to Francis Ford Coppola. I mean, which here again, you look back at that upset where he actually won the Oscar over Francis Ford Coppola. That speaks volumes. It really does speak volumes as to how much of an impact that Cabaret made on the public. But going back to Christopher Isherwood, so it basically showcases uh, a lot of the experiences that he had with Jean, who is represented by Sally here, played by Liza Minnelli, uh, and the friendships that they would make with other people. Now, this story had been done as a play, and in 1951, the play was actually a hit and had Julie Harris in the role, which Liza Minnelli would eventually inherit for Cabaret. And in 1955, they actually filmed a version of that play in a very low budget British production called I Am the Camera. It is available on YouTube, although I must say that if you're a hardcore Cabaret fan, if you really wanted to dig and actually read or listen to the Christopher Isherwood stories after watching Cabaret and you want to go so far as to watch that 1955 movie, be my guest. I couldn't get through half of it. I thought it was it was too static, it was too low budget, it was too amateurish. And really the only reason to watch I Am a Camera is to basically watch a filmed version of Julie Harris's recreation of her Tony Award winning performance. Because, yes, she did actually win a Tony for that production. And she's really the only reason worth watching it. Lawrence Harvey is essentially miscast in the Christopher Isherwood role. And Christopher Isherwood himself absolutely hated the movie. As a matter of fact, just to quote this right here, Isherwood recorded his distaste for the film in his diary, noting his attendance at a June 22nd, 1955 preview. He found the film, quote, a truly shocking and disgraceful mess. I must admit that John Collier is largely to blame for a sloppy, confused script, but everything is awful, except for Julie, who was misdirected. In a letter to friend John Lehman, Isherwood called the film, quote, disgusting, ooh la la, near pornographic trash, and a shameful exhibition. So, and also I will add on top of all that a retrospective for the film in 2005 written by Phil Hall for Film Threat. He questioned the casting of Harvey as Isherwood, saying that the role called for a light comedic touch that was never Harvey's forte. Harvey's underplaying of the part he wrote clashes with Harris's unrestrained stage-style performance of hers. Still, he found that the film is a, quote, intriguing curio that garners interest for its exploration of the anti-Semitism that gave rise to the Nazis and for its handling of its touchier aspects of the original sources, including Isherwood's homosexuality and Sally's abortion, which became a false pregnancy scare for the film. So there's that. It's basically now a footnote in film history. And here again, Cabaret is basically largely overshadowed that production. And unless you're doing some serious research behind whether you're I don't know, studying cabaret in college, whether as a theater production or whatnot, I don't think that movie is worth it for anybody. It's just not. I mean, here again, if you're a Julie Harris fan, absolutely, but unfortunately, not many people remember who Julie Harris was. As a matter of fact, I mean, honestly, I never even knew who Julie Harris was until I saw her in The Member of the Wedding, which was a 1953 film produced by Stanley Kramer. And yeah, produced by Stanley Kramer, where she is very good in that, and it's based on a book by Carson McCullers. Very good movie. If you decide to seek it out, but at the same time, I am a Cameron is now kind of a forgotten asterisk in the history of Cabaret as a musical, because Cabaret opened up on Broadway in 1966. It got rave reviews. It went on to have over 1,100 performances. It was really a massive, massive hit. And what's interesting is that Bob Fosse knew that the theater and film were completely different mediums, and I think he learned learned a lot from his um, mistakes that were probably done on Sweet Charity in terms of coming onto this film, because he basically, once he found out that the producer or the of Cabaret was extended an offer to direct the movie, he passed on it, and then he called up the producer, whose name is Cy Fuhrer, and Bob Fosse called him up and basically begged him to direct Cabaret. And here again, I mean, there was the Sweet Charity experience that was under consideration, but eventually they convinced the investors that Bob Fosse was the right choice for this movie. Um, because I mean, he was still very successful, in the world of theater, and even if Sweet Charity wasn't a success, it still showed at least that he knew how to direct a movie, and that he learned from his mistakes, obviously. But yeah, it showcases this very loving, very interesting relationship between Liza Minnelli and Michael York's characters as they traverse Berlin in 1931. But yeah, Bob Fosse, going back to Bob Fosse for a moment, he would eventually make three more movies. He would go on to make Lenny 2 years later, which is about the comedian Lenny Bruce. And let me tell you, I have a hard time deciding which one is my favorite Fosse movie, if it's Cabaret or if it's Lenny. Part of me wants to lean towards Lenny, although I mean it just doesn't have the spectacle that Cabaret does. Lenny is it's a black and white movie. It was shot in black and white, and it showcases the comedian Lenny Bruce as he deals with charges of vulgarity and just ridiculous trumped up charges that any comedian would laugh at nowadays. But back then they didn't like the fact that he used the word come as a verb. Well, okay. And the movie stars Dustin Hoffman as Lenny Bruce and Valerie Perrine as his wife. And it's an amazing, amazing movie. I highly recommend it. And then in 1975, he put out what many consider his masterpiece, which is All That Jazz, which was actually based on, while he was editing Lenny, he also went through a heart attack, and so it showcases not only his death, which he is anticipating, but he's also it's basically based on Bob Fosse's life, and it stars Roy Scheider playing as a character inspired by Bob Fosse. And it's a great meta movie. I mean, it's the music is sensational, the numbers are sensational, the satire is masterful. It's a very dark movie, though, and it's really not for every taste. In fact, I can almost guarantee that it doesn't have near the popularity of, something like Cabaret, but also Chicago, which, of course, he had brought to Broadway in 1975, and it was eventually filmed in 2002, directed by Rob Marshall and starring Richard Gere and Renee Zellweger, who just played Judy Garland in a movie actually recently, and she got Best Actress for that. So there you go. I got to confess, I was not really a fan of that Judy movie with Renee Zellweger. I mean, she was great. I did not like how they utilized the "Over the Rainbow" number at the end. I thought that was a bit too obvious way to end the movie. I mean, I wish it had gone for subtlety and just showcased what who she was rather than the song that she's most familiar with. It's still worth seeing for Renee Zellweger's performance, but be prepared for disappointment, particularly if you are a Judy Garland fan, because I'm sure, like a lot of biopics like that, you rankle with certain details and certain incidents, and like, okay, I mean, this scene rings false while this scene comes off pretty well. It's a hodgepodge, and very much like in the style of that very well. Actually, I think what was worse, even though it has no connection to it, is I was disappointed with Being the Ricardos, which was the I Love Lucy quote unquote biopic, which came out recently from Aaron Sorkin. Liza Minnelli, it's interesting is that she actually after Cabaret, one of the things that she did right after Cabaret was a direct sequel to Wizard of Oz in animated form called Journey Back to Oz. Now that is essentially the official direct sequel to the original, while the 1985 Disney film Return to Oz is a unofficial sequel. Which, if anybody wants more information, they can just go to my audio commentary for Return to Oz, which is done with the producer of Remembering Return to Oz, which is a documentary that just came out recently. But yeah, so Journey Back to Oz, she did that in 1974. Oh no, I'm sorry. She did that in actually 1964, but it took 10 years for it to come out. So yeah, in fact, she did that when her mother was still alive. Even see, that's the amazing thing is that she's the daughter of Judy Garland and Vincent Minnelli, who was of course a director at MGM that directed Garland in movies like Me Being in St. Louis and everything. And when Liza Minnelli won the Oscar for Cabaret, I mean, Vincent Minnelli was seated right next to her, and he was just crying so profusely because this was his business. This was, everything that he's worked for his whole life. And to see his daughter be crowned queen at that moment was unbelievable, I think, for him. And of course, it's sad that Judy never got to see Liza Minnelli in a very seductive pose right now. Yes, but I mean, but the music numbers are of course dynamite. I mean, we just had Mine Hair, which is wonderful, and we're about to experience a few more here very very soon. By all accounts, Liza Minnelli and Michael York got along fabulously. And Michael York, what's funny is that when he auditioned, what he learned was that basically, for this role, they're basically looking for a Michael York type. So I guess he thought, well, you know what? I think I might be an ideal candidate for this role. I mean, so he goes in audition and he wins. I mean, he gets the role. So I mean, there you go. Um, Michael York has had, of course, a very long career on stage and screen. I mean, he's familiar from so many things. Um, Probably to most modern day audiences, I would think that Basil Expedition and the Austin Powers trilogy is probably what he's most known for. Um, Interestingly enough, I saw him in a television miniseries growing up called Till We Meet Again, which is based on the Judith Krantz novel. And Michael York was basically the top billed star of that miniseries. But what was amazing, it also had small parts by Courtney Cox before she had got on Friends, the sitcom, long running sitcom Friends. And it also had Hugh Grant in the role of a particularly nasty Nazi sympathizer. Oh, Hugh Grant is glorious in this movie. If you ever wanted to see Hugh Grant play a Nazi, seek that mini series out. it's it's truly amazing what Hugh Grant does in that movie. It really, he is so hateful, so despicable, so sleazy that I mean you love to hate him. You absolutely love to hate Hugh Grant. And remember, this came out at a time when nobody knew who Hugh Grant was. He was, it came out long before he was a star. But I mean, in 1989, I mean, Michael York was the big reason why they were promoting this mini series because, of course, his um, previous roles. I know a lot of people love him in like films like Logan's Run and other films like that, and I'm honestly not as familiar with his resume as some others. So I apologize if I don't have much more to say on Michael York, but I, I mean, uh, time for a drink break. Please excuse me. Got some ginger ale here. Mm. So yeah, Bob Fosse, of course, after all that jazz in 1979, he would make only one more film, which was the 1983 um, movie based on the tragedy of Dorothy R. Stratton, the Playboy playmate who was murdered by her husband slash manager in 1980, Paul Snider. Eric Roberts played um, her husband, and Mariel Hemingway played Dorothy Stratton in that movie, Star 80. And it's a really good movie. It's hard to watch because it was it was actually shot where Dorothy Stratton was murdered. Apparently, Bob Fosse apparently had the cojones to actually film in the actual apartment where Paul Snider murdered Dorothy R. Stratton with a shotgun. And I think it's a very good movie. It would be number 4 on my Bob Fosse list, below Lenny, Cabaret, and all that jazz, but above Sweet Charity. My whole thing about Star 80, though, which is a little disturbing, is the fact that Bob Fosse tends to focus more attention on Snyder's character than Stratton's character, which is kind of a shame because we almost revel in the sleaze that this guy exhibits. Which even though a lot of people loved Eric Roberts in that role, there was a lot of complaining about, well, he was so good, why wasn't he nominated for an Oscar? And well, Roger Ebert actually said on a television interview years later, well, if you play a creep, the Academy won't even consider you. As long as you don't play a creep, they'd be more than happy to give you an award as long as you don't play a creep. And unfortunately, Eric Roberts played way too much of a creep in Star 80 for it to get any kind of Oscar consideration. So that was unfortunately Fosse's last stab at Oscar greatness, but but it was pretty much ignored in 1983. It was pretty much a failure like Sweet Charity, obviously. So the 3 films that Bob Fosse made in the 1970s are pretty much masterpieces. I mean, Cabaret and Lenny and all that jazz were all considered I think by the majority of the film community and by audiences in general as just avant-garde masterpieces, while Sweet Charity and Star 80 are just not brought up they're not talked about nearly as much, and they're not cited as much. Let's put it that way. I mean, and that's the thing is that Sweet Charity is an overblown musical, while Star 80 is a pretty depressing tragedy. And those films are, I think, even more difficult to watch than even All That Jazz. I mean, all that jazz really, puts the death issue in your face with that movie, but it's still sensational. I mean, it's still an amazing, amazing movie. But Cabaret was considered a landmark because, to explain in terms of musicals as a genre and in terms as history, you got to understand at the end of the 1960s, the musical was dead. It was just absolutely dead. It. Oliver had won Best Picture, and that was really the absolute last time that you saw a movie of that scale and size being produced, um, because everything else after that just made no money. Sweet Charity was among those movies that bloated musicals that made no money, and there were so many of them. When 1970, the 1970s came around, the musical was considered a genre that was dead. I mean, literally. Now, the funny thing is that, and of course, there was many years. I mean, in the late 70s, throughout the 80s, and into the 90s, we saw very, very few musicals. I mean, Little Shop of Horrors is pretty much like the only recognizable one, and that came out in 1986. I mean, we had a chorus line with Michael Douglas in 1985, which is universally hated by those who have not only seen a chorus line on stage, but I've also played in a chorus line on stage. And then, of course, you got South Park Bigger, Longer on Uncut, which is actually a really great musical. I love the Randy Newman, Trey Parker songs in South Park. I mean, that's and of course, well, the South Park guys, they would later win Tony's Galore for the Book of Mormon in 2011, which, if I'm not mistaken, it does have a Cabaret reference or two. I would have to, because Book of Mormon, what that musical did, it had love for like every musical. I mean, you could recognize little clips here and there from everything from Mary Poppins to The Sound of Music. I mean, everything. And it's funny. Julie Andrews was originally approached to play Sally on stage when they were casting in 1966 for or 65 probably for the stage version of Cabaret. But her manager rejected the notion, saying that Sally's character was much too immoral and promiscuous for Julie Andrews to do. And it's funny. It's funny when you go to like Wikipedia and you look up at that portion where it talks about that. It actually has a picture of a smiling Julie Andrews, as if she actually read the script or something, or read the teleplay rather. It's, I rejected it because it was too naughty. But I mean, she had just won the Oscar for Mary Poppins in 1965, and she was about to star in The Sound of Music, which is, of course, a movie that was set in Austria right before World War II. And like Cabaret, The Sound of Music has this growing Nazi um, menace, just percolating underneath all the fun that these people are having. Because to be honest, I mean, do these people even notice it? I mean, do they even notice this looming Nazi threat, or are they just preoccupied in their own pleasures and their own vices and their own romantic relationships, that they don't even recognize this growing German menace that is about to take over the whole country? It's actually pretty scary. I mean, the tone of this musical is so radically different than anything that came out in the 60s and especially the 50s. I mean, it's so dark, and so it it just gets to this underbelly of what Germany was like at the time, knowing that it was about to fall into horribly evil hands. And it's powerful. It really is powerful. I mean, of course, when you get to the final shot of the movie, which may be the most unforgettable shot I've ever seen at the end of any musical. I mean, it certainly leaves such an impression that, like, whoa. And we'll get to it when we see it. But before I do that, Wanted to welcome a few other people in the chat. Daniel Shine, many years ago, saw it with my mom. Hope you're watching it with me again tonight. And welcome, Mr. Zook's Twilight Zone days. Uh, uh, yes, Sweet Charity was not one of my faves, not like Cabaret and all that jazz. I'm in complete agreement. I saw Cabaret many times at Studio 54 with many different Sallys. All right. Awesome. I have to think that could have gone unnoticed. Well, welcome to the commentary, Mr. Zooks. Glad you could come. Yeah. And just to give everybody a timestamp real quick, so you can all jump ahead to where I am, we are approximately 40 minutes in. Go ahead and jump to the 40-minute mark, whether you're watching the movie on HBO Max or whether you're renting it from Amazon or however you're watching it. I am actually watching Cabaret because of this Warner Brothers Blu-ray. Now, interestingly enough, I remember when my parents owned Cabaret on VHS. And as I said into the introduction before I started the commentary, is that I would watch bits and pieces of the movie without seeing the movie as a whole. And here again, I do think that I would have appreciated it a lot more as an adult than I would have back at that time, because in many ways they've called this the first adult musical, despite its PG rating. I mean, we're dealing with bisexuality, we're dealing with abortion and Nazis. I mean, this is radically different stuff for Hollywood musicals. I mean, we've in 1972, nobody had ever experienced something like Cabaret before. It's insane, but yeah, this 2013 release, this Blu-ray only came out 9 years ago. It only came out 9 years ago, and it came out as one of those Warner Brothers digibooks, and it's actually a very, very impressive release. I mean, the video and audio quality is perfect, and like I said, I don't foresee Warner Brothers releasing this on 4K anytime soon. So, if you're going to get this movie on physical media, believe me when I say that this digibook is the way to go. Now, it was re-released by Warner Archive in 2018, which I don't think they added any extra features, and I think it's questionable if they retained the bonus features from this Blu-ray. But I love this Blu-ray. I think the extra features on it are great. There's a 30-minute documentary that was brand new, filmed for that release, but there were also some vintage clips of Bob Fosse working with the dancers and everything in some of the smaller featurettes. There was also an older documentary from the 1990s, pretty much, and it pretty much covers all the bases, and also an audio commentary. So, this release pretty much covers all the bases when it comes to the production aspects and the history of Cabaret and everything. But this digibook, I find it very, very interesting, because they break down in very clear form here what the history of this is and where they get all their inspirations. Okay, so, and I know I mentioned some of this before, but I want to read this so that I can cover any other bases. But the novel that originally this was based on was called Goodbye to Berlin, which came out in 1939, and of course written by Christopher Isherwood. He was a young English writer who lived in Berlin from 1929 to 1933 and wrote a series of semi-autobiographical stories about his experiences there, which were collected into a novel entitled Goodbye to Berlin. One of those stories, the primary influence for what would become Cabaret, was Sally Bowles, first published as a novella in 1937 and inspired by a young woman Isherwood knew. In the story, Sally was English and worked only briefly as a singer at a bar called the Lady Windermere, but her physical description should sound familiar to viewers of the film. She had the green fingernails, powdered white makeup, and large brown eyes, which Liza Minnelli would embody so iconically. On the other hand, it should be noted that the original Sally was also an explicitly untalented performer. The narrator of the story was named, fittingly, Chris Isherwood. In Goodbye to Berlin, Chris and Sally did not enter into a romantic relationship, though Sally did meet on an early incarnation of Maximilian, a wealthy American named Clive, and through another relationship became pregnant and had an abortion. So, and one of the things I wanted to mention is that I've already talked about earlier what Christopher Isherwood's reaction was to that 1955 British film version called I'm a Camera. Now, the good news is that he liked Cabaret a lot more. Yes, he was still alive in 1972. And he saw the movie and he liked it a lot. Although he did note that, of course, Sally, the real Sally Bowles, who was this woman named Jean, was a very untalented performer, very third rate. And that's the thing, is that had that woman been Liza Minnelli, Christopher Isherwood noted that they would have had lines going out the Cabaret for miles. It doesn't matter if they were Nazis or not. I mean, she would have become an international sensation. Had that really been the case. So you could call the movie out for being a little unrealistic in that regard. But look, I mean, Liza Minnelli is wonderful in this movie. I mean, I think that she perfectly inhabits a lot of her mother's best qualities. But, she also has this kittenish appeal, which I find irresistible. I mean, particularly in the Mine Hair number and the other numbers that she does in the Kit Kat Club. I mean, she's luminous in this movie, and she sells it very much so as Sally Bowles. Even if her talent was considerably raised for the purposes of course, drama and power and everything. But it works. It does work in this movie very much. And here again, going back to the difference of adaptation, Bob Fosse, like I said before, knew exactly what the differences between the two mediums of theater and film were. And so what he did very ingeniously was he decided not to go with the majority of the songs. In other words, any song in the musical version that premiered in 1966 on Broadway, which were known as like songbook songs, any songs where the characters would spontaneously break out into song, which is very unrealistic of a lot of those old movie musicals, he said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. All the music, with the exception of one number, and we'll point it out when we get to it, because it's a very chilling number. But pretty much all the music is taking place right inside the Kit Kat bar, so that as if you were a patron of the club, and you would absorb all this music as it comes in. Now we get to, of course, one of the most famous numbers of Cabaret. Now, a lot of people wondered, of course, at the time why this was not, why this particular song wasn't nominated for the Oscar for Best Original Song. And as a matter of fact, the Oscar that year went to The Poseidon Adventure, of all movies. Yeah, just real quick, The Godfather won 3, Cabaret won 8, and The Poseidon Adventure was the only other one to win multiple Oscars. And even then, it only got 2. Best Original Song and a special Oscar for its special effects. So those were the 3 big Oscar winners of 1972. But as you're enjoying this number by Liza Minnelli real quick, let me just bring up something here, because I just want to make sure I got this right. But this is one of the most famous songs in the musical, and of course in musical theater. Yes. The song Maybe This Time, of course, was written by John Kander and Fred Ebb for actress Kay Ballard, later included for the 1972 film Cabaret. But it had been previously recorded. Liza Minnelli, Minnelli fans know full well that this song was previously recorded for her debut studio album in 1964 called Liza Liza. And then it was subsequently on the sixth studio album, New Feeling, which became a traditional pop standard after its 1972 inclusion in Cabaret. So this was not an original song, and this wasn't originally done for Cabaret, but they needed a song at this moment. And as you can see, a lot of the tables are empty and everything, as Fosse just wants to focus on Sally and basically her, you know, expand, basically shouting out her themes, her desire to become an actress, her ultimate desire to become a huge film star. A couple films I wanted to mention that are not they're not really connected to Cabaret, but I think they're very interesting in terms of when they came out in 1932. Which, of course, in the early 30s, it was known as the pre-code era. Now, of course, this movie is set in Berlin in 1931, right before the Nazis rose to power and everything. Well, in Germany in 1931, there was a film that came out called Modkin in Uniform, and it was based on a play by Krista Wenslow, and it basically showcases the um, lesbian relationship between a student and teacher at a all-girls boarding school. There was not a single male character in the entire movie, and it was remade in the 1950s in a color version in Germany. The interesting thing about that movie is that not only is there no men in it, every single performance is played by a woman. And we don't see any like love scenes. There's nothing that's really graphic in the movie necessarily, but like I said, there is an absolute attraction between this girl who grew up without a mother and this teacher at this all girls boarding school, and it became a hit in Germany. And reportedly, even though the Nazi Party ordered all copies to be destroyed, reportedly the Minister of Propaganda liked the film on a technical level, even if he thought it was awful. I mean, they changed the ending and everything because they felt like the lesbian deserved what quote unquote the teacher deserved what was coming to her because of her lesbian tendencies. But it was heavily censored and eventually burned and banned and everything. And it was finally given a Blu-ray only last year. Finally given a decent Blu-ray only last year for the first time that movie is available, and it's a fascinating look into early German cinema, as well as being one of the first films to touch upon homosexuality. And it's a landmark film in so many ways. Give it a chance. But also another film that it makes me think from this period was a Marlene Dietrich film from 1932 called Blonde Venus. And later on in Cabaret, we're going to see this musical number between a gorilla or somebody in a gorilla suit and Joel Grey. And the thing is, even though that song has a much more darker subtext with regards to anti-Semitism, honestly, when I first saw this movie, I thought that was actually a direct tip of the hat to Blonde Venus when Marlene Dietrich sung in this gorilla outfit singing the song Hot Voodoo. Uh, it was a Paramount picture directed by Joseph von Sternberg in 1932, but it was a German movie, and it came out basically right about this time. And I was just wondering if that was a little tip of the hat, but no, actually, no. Fosse has much more darker goals with the use of the music in this movie, because a lot of times when we're in the cabaret and they're quote unquote singing, they're actually commenting on what's going on outside, almost warning the audience when, and it's almost like they're just not listening. They just came to enjoy the show. And but no, there's this issue with, oh my God, what is this looming Nazi threat that nobody is talking about, that nobody's even uh, seems to recognize? It's very scary, very scary days that this movie depicts. But I don't think anybody, especially those who grew up with musicals, the traditional, like Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals, could have walked into Cabaret and expected how dark this film gets, like how adult this film gets, how mature it gets. It does. I mean, there's nothing family friendly about Cabaret at all, not one bit. I mean, despite its PG rating. Okay. And remember, this came out at a time when there was no PG-13. It was basically just R or PG. And this was a PG. Although, what's hilarious, in the United Kingdom, this was evidently given an X rating. I mean, this was cited as the very first musical to get an X rating. It's like, wow. That's a tremendous irony that the English were a lot more they were a lot more harsh in terms of censorship with this movie than the American censors were. I mean, this got a PG rating, and yet it's considered like the like the where it broke. I mean, and that's why I brought up Madkin in Uniform before, because of the fact that it's a movie that actually brings in gay themes, particularly at a time when it was unheard of in any kind of cinema. Oh yeah, I remember her fingernails here. Yeah. But I mean, Liza Minnelli, she's just wonderful throughout this movie. But it's a shame that she didn't have a big hit after Cabaret until 1981, when she played opposite Dudley Moore in the movie Arthur, which is also, I think, beloved among Liza Minnelli fans. But mm, the beer garden scene is pretty scary. Yep, yep. I know. You're absolutely right. Uh, but yeah, oh man, these images of 1931 Germany are just amazing. Okay, now here is the another legendary number in Cabaret. This is the song "Money Money," and this, as well as the next one called "Two Ladies." They're kind of commenting on the relationship with Liza Minnelli and Michael York in this movie. But I love the curtain in the back with the letters and everything. The coins. I mean, this is a great duet. This is just a terrific duet, and I think a lot of people commented on Joel Grey's character in this movie, like how much he's almost like a demon or maybe the devil. He has this like, this very devilish like Cheshire cat quality about him, and that's the thing, is that his character is basically completely ambiguous. I mean, he's just known as the Master of Ceremonies. That's it, or the MOC. That's all we know about this character, and I think that Joel Grey, does a superlative job of keeping the mystery about this guy in check. We're constantly questioning what his deal is. I mean, can you imagine? I can't think of anything that this guy might do outside the Cabaret. I mean, that's the thing. He's a complete mystery in this movie. I mean, with the makeup and the rouge and the just everything about this guy is just off the wall. But I mean, it's pretty easy to see, especially with this number alone, why Minnelli and Gray won Oscars, because yeah, I mean they're just dazzling, um, particularly together. Here again, this was all choreographed by Bob Fosse. I mean, who was given full credit for all the dance numbers and all the stage shows. Yeah, his fingerprints are all over this. Now, I must confess at this point that I still have not seen the movie version of Chicago, and I've yet to experience anything about that show whatsoever. Even though I've been slowly but surely finishing my Bob Fosse education, because here again, I've seen all five of his movies, and I love the music in both Cabaret and all that jazz. And like I said, Chicago is pretty much all that's left. I mean, I guess of Bob Fosse. Although I do need to finish up that mini series on Hulu, which here again I can't recommend it enough. Sam Rockwell as Bob Fosse and Michelle Williams as Gwen Verdon in that Fosse Verdon documentary, which is over at Hulu. It's just amazing, absolutely amazing. Like you see in the shadows. I mean, with the grapes on the foot, and it's oh, that's amazing. That's so amazing. It's amazing how many times we also cut out of the club and just go somewhere else to watch some of the main characters have drinks and everything. John Stamos played the MC. Now, see, I heard that Neil Patrick Harris actually. Oh no, not it wasn't Neil Patrick Harris. It was Alan Cumming, who is in Goldeneye, and he's been in other films. He's played the MC in numerous revivals, not just one, but he's actually played the MC numerous times. Natasha Richardson was great as Sally when I saw it many times. Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, I like Natasha Richardson. They both did. Yeah, I knew Neil Patrick Harris also played the MC at some point. I knew because I mean that's the thing when you look at the history of this musical in general. Because okay, 1972 film adaptation aside, we had the original Broadway production, we had the original West End production, and then we had revivals in 1986, 1987, 1993, 1998. 2006, 2012, 2014, and then just last year, in fact, I was going to bring that up to just real quick. Man. In May of 2021, it was announced that Eddie Redmayne and Jessie Buckley would star as the MC and Sally Bowles in a new immersive production directed by Rebecca Frecknall, designed by Tom Scott, and choreographed by Julia Cheng. Musical supervision and direction by Jennifer White, lighting design by Isabel Bird, sound design by Nick Lidster, and casting by Stuart Burt, fight direction by Jonathan Holby. The production also features Omari Douglas as Cliff Bradshaw, Liza Sadovi as Fraulein Schneider, Elliot Levy as Herr Schultz, Stuart Clark as Ernest Ludwig, and Anna Jane Casey as Fraulein Kost. And the production opened up at the Playhouse Theatre, which is in England, on November 15th of 2021, and it has been renovated as the Kit Kat Club, with an intimate in-the-round setting which members of the audience can sit at tables and dine. On December 14th, 2021, it was announced the production would be extended to October of 2022. So if you want to see Cabaret in this 2021 revival with Eddie Redmayne, like it's at the Playhouse Theatre, a West End theater in the city of Westminster near Trafalgar Square. Go ahead, jump on a plane, go to London, and check out the production because it sounds amazing. I almost forgot that, this is not the first musical I've done a commentary for. As a matter of fact, a couple months ago, I did Bedknobs and Broomsticks, which was a wonderful one to do. But I also did Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, which this was filmed. Cabaret was filmed almost entirely in German studios and German streets and everything. But the studio it was at, it had to wait for the main stage to be open because that's where the Willy Wonka set was at. Because Willy Wonka was filmed in Germany literally right before Cabaret went there in 1971. But Cabaret was filmed over 3 months' time, I think, from like February to July of 71, and all in Germany. I mean, the entire production was filmed in Germany, which gives, of course, the film a very authentic locale and to aid with the setting and everything. But it's wonderful. Oh God, yeah. Yeah, I mean, all throughout the movie, Bob Fosse provides like little snippets. Like, okay, like we see it in the briefest of moments that the owner of the Kit Kat Club is getting beaten up by Nazi sympathizers. Literally, right outside the club, while Joel Grey is in there doing his thing at the Masters of Ceremonies and everything. Oh man. But Fosse provides little snippets, and he just builds everything up. This very looming, monstrous threat that is going to just hit Berlin like a. Okay, now this is the number 2 women, a very cute number. Joel Grey just looks like he's having the time of his life doing all this. He's really just such a colorful presence. But here again, we don't know exactly if he's demonic or if he's just eccentric. Or I don't know. But I love how like the audience is constantly questioning who he is and what he's doing and everything. I mean, what is his master plan? What is his end game? Does he have a goal, or is he just simply the master of ceremonies, intended to invite the audience in and enjoy the show while they still can? this is all great. This is all wonderful stuff. And here again, kudos to Bob Fosse for. I mean, like I said, it's pretty stunning. It's pretty stunning that he won the Oscar over Francis Ford Coppola for this film. But then you look at scenes like this and you're thinking, oh yeah, I can see this. I can see that. I can see that. Now, Coppola did in fact win an Oscar for The Godfather anyway for the writing of it. So, it's not like he went home empty-handed. And it won Best Picture. I mean, that's the thing. Cabaret walked away with 8 Oscars, but not Best Picture. And to this day, it's the film to have won the most Oscars without winning Best Picture. So that's it's quite a feat unto itself. But yeah, I mean, all these numbers. I mean, some of this stuff was in the musical, but some of it wasn't. I mean, like I said, it was very. They cherry picked a lot of the music while dumping a lot of the other stuff by just keeping all the music central to the club. That was the key focus for Bob Fosse and the producer, was to keep everything that was music related only connected to the club. And like I said, there is one exception. We haven't gotten there yet, but we're getting there. We are definitely getting there. The decadence of Studio 54's past really added to it. Oh man. Do another timestamp here real quick. We are at the 1 hour and 9 minute mark. So we are 1 hour and 9 minutes in if you want to go and meet me there. And we have just a little bit, about 45 minutes left here to go. Uh, yeah, I hate that moment during the commentary where you feel like you've already said everything you need to say. And then I mean, I knew Cabaret was going to be a challenge because even though I grew up around this movie, it's not like Romance in the Stone where I saw Cabaret like a dozens of times when I was a kid. I only saw snippets of it, and it wasn't until only in the past few years when I finally began to fully appreciate it for what it was doing and what it had accomplished. Because I mean, this film is a landmark musical, and here again, it has that distinction of appealing to people that are not fans of musicals, which is it's almost impossible to, it's nearly impossible to but 1972, this year also saw the release of another musical, which I will be doing a commentary on in July. And that happens to be my favorite movie musical of all time, which is 1776. And I'm very much looking forward to doing that. Even though it's 3 hours long and it's going to involve doing research on like 300 historical figures, oh, I'm more than ready and more than up for the challenge. But that actually came out in November of 72. However, I'm going to be doing it in July for, I think, obvious reasons. But Cabaret, unlike 1776, Cabaret was a hit. I mean, it made $42 million. I mean, I know that's a far cry from The Godfather, which of course made like 280 million or something. It was like the number one film of all time up until that point. But Cabaret was, you got to admit, even the most staunch of Godfather fans have to admit, if they sit down and watch Cabaret, they have to admit that, okay, this is some serious competition. Okay. I mean, here again, what this movie accomplishes is extraordinary. But at the same time, anybody who doesn't have a lot of love for the theater, I think may struggle with this, at least on an initial viewing. I mean, I don't know if they would be more inclined to be um, to yeah, I don't know if they would like the realistic elements more than the musical elements, or whether the combination would have any impact whatsoever. I mean, the thing is that if you're not a fan of musicals, give Cabaret a chance, because I think it does have a universal appeal about it, where if you're not one inclined to go see like Enchanted, or see something like Wicked, at the theater or whatnot, but rather, you know, if you're willing to hear the leads do a couple of numbers on a stage, but not in the aspect of, okay, we're just going to sing because it's time to sing a song now. No, they're doing those songs for a reason. That's their job. So it goes along with the whole thing where, you know, this is a unique musical where it doesn't act according to the traditional rules of what musicals are supposed to be. And here again, Bob Fosse really knew what exactly to get rid of. He knew what fat to trim, because I mean, obviously, he knew he didn't want to lose a major part of the audience just because they did not like musicals or musical theater. I mean, he knew, he was that much of a genius that he knew exactly how to appeal to those who don't like musicals, and this was the perfect way to do it. Now, as this relationship develops between Michael York and Liza Minnelli, and we come to find out here, there's a lot going on between not only both of them but also the three of them. I mean, this is a very complex relationship, but here again, not. I love how Fosse and the writer Jay Presson, they don't depend on dialogue, but they depend on actions. I mean, you can just tell Michael York just from his expressions, and these little movements that he does, like when he fills the glass back up and he keeps looking back, wondering. Uh, and but this is also a relationship that unfortunately is doomed to fail, and that's what makes it a little bit more, I think, bittersweet is the right term, because we know that this relationship is not going to be ever consummated in a traditional audience pleasing way. But here again, a little bit more realistic and a little bit more um, relatable almost. And just, I mean, here again, it's not concerned like with Sweet Charity, which was Bob Fosse's first film. It wasn't determined to be like, oh, I'm looking for a man and I'll get married to him and I'll live happily ever after and all that. It wasn't. No, this is completely different. Um, Here again, this bisexual triangle, as you will, you never ever would have seen this in something like The Pajama Game, which is another musical that Bob Fosse worked on in the 1950s. The movie version starred Doris Day, and it also had Broadway star John Raitt in his only film performance. I actually did Pajama Game on the stage in high school, along with Christmas Carol and Oliver and a few other musicals. So I had developed some appreciation for musical theater. Um, but even then, I knew that Cabaret was just much too mature for somebody like me growing up. I mean, I just wouldn't have clung to this the way other people have, or particularly people in 1972, because one of the reasons why I'm doing commentaries celebrating the 50th anniversaries is because I want to see what the impact of them was like when they came out. And Cabaret, it was one of those films that nobody believed in. Oh, a musical with bisexuality and Nazis. Oh yeah, that's really gonna fly well with the American film going audience. But it did. It did fly well with the movie going audience, and I think Liza Minnelli is a huge part of the film's success. But Fosse and Gray are also very important components here. Oh yeah, we're taking a drive out in the country now. And okay, now is the perfect time. I think now is the perfect time to bring up the cinematographer. His name was Jeffrey Unsworth, and he was one of the many uh, people to have won an Oscar for this movie. Let me just bring his. But he had shot for Stanley Kubrick 2001: A Space Odyssey, and in fact, Richard Donner's first Superman film. That was the last film that Unsworth shot, and in fact, the very first bit that you see in Superman the movie is a dedication, a love and respect to Jeffrey Unsworth, one of the legends of very old school British cinematographer. He also did, just to let everybody know, in terms of cinematography, he also did, after Cabaret, he won the Oscar for Cabaret, and then he did Zardoz, he did Murder on the Orient Express, Return of the Pink Panther, and like I said, Superman and Superman 2 were pretty much the very last films that he shot. Although he also shot Tess for Roman Polanski. And he also shot Beckett and Othello, Genghis Khan. I mean, yeah, he's celebrated as one of the great cinematographers who ever lived, and uh, and his work here in Cabaret is amazing. But we have finally reached this song, which yeah, this song right here is the only song that is executed outside of the Kit Kat Club, and this is a song called "Tomorrow Belongs to Me," and it's not a historically authentic song, but instead was written and composed by two Jewish musicians. who happened to be Candor and Ebb, as part of a validly anti-fascist work. Because a lot of people kind of attacked them, as well as um, the producer of the stage version, that they were bringing anti-Semitism or celebrating it with this song. That is not the case. As a matter of fact, that is the complete opposite. The writers of the music and the lyrics were in fact Jewish, and they were in fact doing this as an anti-fascist statement. And the nationalist character of the song serves as a warning to the musical's characters of the rise of Nazism. Nonetheless, Tomorrow Belongs to Me has at times been adopted by right-wing, neo-Nazi, and alternate right groups as an anthem. So this song is quite a to bring this. I mean, here again in 1972, I can't imagine what people in the theater were thinking when they were during this one particular number. Because before this, you had all the romantic shenanigans with Michael York and Liza Minnelli and all the Kit Kat Club like shenanigans in there. This is some scary stuff. This is like watching Triumph of the Will now. I mean, this is really, really going to places that nobody in the 60s and 70s could have ever been prepared for. Is an ostensibly upbeat musical with Nazi undertones, or at least the ever growing Nazi threat, which is going to be blooming in before you know it, like literally right around the corner. It's going to happen, and it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. But yeah, this song was not without controversy. I mean, it was not a real song that was sung by the Hitler Youth at that time. Um, but I mean, it feels just too real, and the effect is much too chilling to merely shake off. I mean, it just, wow, like we just listened to a song like that by the Nazi youth. Oh my god. I don't think that All That Jazz would work on the stage. Did they do it on stage? I don't know. From what I understand, they did not do All That Jazz on the stage. I could be wrong though. I mean, I don't think that they did. Excuse me. Oh, I'm so sorry. One thing I don't like to do during commentaries is to burp like that. But aside from the final dance sequence of All That Jazz being depicted in the FX series Fosse Verdon, starring Sam Rockwell as Bob Fosse, the Get Happy Dream sequence musical number in season 7 of House was inspired by that. Okay. And the film is referenced heavily in the Better Call Saul episode Mijo. During the episode, there is a montage in which Jimmy's routine is revealed, grabbing his coffee, defending clients, collecting his check, and his ongoing battle with the parking attendant. During his routine, he always looks in the mirror and says, "It's showtime, folks," a line from All That Jazz. And finally, the David Fincher-directed music video for Paula Abdul's song Cold Hearted is inspired by the Take Off With Us dance sequence in All That Jazz. Well, there you go. So, I mean, yeah, it's influenced a lot of things, but it's not really, there's never been a stage version of it, unfortunately. And unfortunately, I think Star 80 and Leonard are much too grim movies to actually try to turn into musicals. I mean, if anybody on Broadway wants to take a shot at those, just to honor Fosse, but I think that there's a reason why those movies are deliberately, they work deliberately not as musicals. I mean, they're just very, very tragic stories. Lenny and Star 80 are just, they're just almost too disturbing to watch. But I was mentioning earlier about The Sound of Music because that, of course, won Best Picture, and that was this massive, big budget studio musical where Nazis were again the looming threat. But in this film, I think that it's done a little bit more subtly and a little bit more believably, dare I say. And also, I can't help but laugh at the end of Sound of Music because, look, okay, there are moments in Sound of Music which are wonderful. I think that it's a little too sentimental for its own good, and every time the ending, which is breathtaking in terms of photography, but by God, if you knew that they were actually going in the wrong direction, geographically speaking, when they're trotting up the mountain, I mean, every time I see them, I just want to yell at them and say, "Hey, idiots! You're going the wrong way!" Now, it should also be noted that originally, before Bob Fosse came on board for Cabaret, that they had originally offered it to Billy Wilder, who had directed, Some Like It Hot and Sunset Boulevard and everything, but he turned it down because he felt that he just could not return to the scene of his youth, being a Holocaust survivor. There was just no way that he was going to go back to Berlin. In fact, that he was offered Schindler's List years later, and he passed that up too. So, but also Gene Kelly was also offered the opportunity to direct this movie, and I think that Gene Kelly just wouldn't have been the right fit for this material. And I think that the producer, Cy Fewer, knew that as well. And that's why they eventually didn't go with Gene Kelly. But like I said, Bob Fosse had to get it down on his hands and knees for this role. But I think that everybody knew at that time that he was the right director for this. Uh, in terms of the ambition, in terms of he was going to bring something radically different to the movie musical at that point. And here again, I think that after Sweet Charity, I think he realized that, you know, what works in a musical and what not works in a musical for a movie going audience. I think he knew exactly what he was supposed to do to make Cabaret a bullseye based on his experience and his brilliance in what he was able to accomplish. And here again, I think the three films he made in the 1970s, Cabaret included, are all essential movies, and they all need to be seen by film historians and film buffs, and they need to be studied and admired. And here again, I mean, I like Star 80 for what it is, but it's very depressing. I just think that Sweet Charity and Star 80 are the ones that are not as powerful as Cabaret or Lenny, or especially Lenny. Oh my God, all that jazz. But this is a great scene right here where we finally realize that Liza Minnelli probably has gotten pregnant by the other guy, and says that, I've been screwing him, and he says, "Oh, so have I." So, like, oh, okay. So yeah, the bit of a bisexual triangle going on here. Here again, I would have not seen any of this stuff when I was a kid. I would not have picked up on any of this. I mean, there's a scene earlier on Michael York when he goes to the urinal, the Kit Kat Club, and there's one of the drag queens in there taking a piss, and he kind of looks over and kind of admires him a little bit and everything. I never would have picked up on that as a young man. I never ever would have picked up on that in terms of all the subtle innuendos and all that stuff. But just to knock off real quick, who also won the other Oscars that this film won? See, so it won Best Director for Bob Fosse, won Best Actress for Liza Minnelli. Joel Grey got Best Supporting Actor. Art Direction for Rolf Zeichelbauer, Hans Jürgen Kiebach, and Herbert Strabel. And the art direction is, the art direction is amazing. But what's interesting is that they actually, during the production, had a very difficult time doing research. I mean, they had tried to find anybody that was associated with these cabarets back in the 1930s to actually come out and help out and be research associates on the movie. But the problem was they couldn't find any. They were lucky enough to find a couple of patrons, but that was about it. Uh, they seriously had to, they were struggling to find, first person accounts, because a lot of times, those histories had already been, burned and covered up, and after the fall of Germany in the 40s and everything. So they had an extremely difficult time during research behind the scenes. But the art direction is amazing. Jeffrey Unsworth won for his cinematography. David Bretherton won for best film editing. And just real quick, he has more than 40 credits. Started out in the 50s. He edited films like An Affair to Remember and Peyton Place, Diary of Anne Frank. He also did State Fair, The Train, the Sandpiper, On a Clear Day You Can See Forever with Barbara Streisand, Westworld, Save the Tiger, Coma, That's Entertainment Part 2, The Big Red One, The Formula, The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, Cannery Row, Clue, and the very last film that he edited was City Hall in 1996 with Al Pacino, John Cusack, and Bridget Fonda. But let's see. He served with the United States Air Force during World War II, and he joined the editing department at 20th Century Fox right after that. Yeah. Roger Greenspun gives some insight into Bretherton's achievement. The film has a musical part. I'm sorry. Hold on. Bretherton's most noted work was the editing of the film Cabaret, which was directed by Bob Fosse. Bretherton received the Academy Award, an Ace Eddie Award, and a nomination for the BAFTA Award for Best Editing. In his 1972 review, Roger Greenspun gives some insight into Bretherton's achievement. The film has a musical part and a non-musical part. Except for Miss Minnelli, none of the major characters sings. And if you add this to the juxtaposition of private lives and public history inherent in the scheme of the Berlin stories, you come up with a structure of extraordinary mechanical complexity. Since everything has to do with everything else, and the cabaret is always commenting on the life outside it, the film sometimes looks like an essay in significant cross-cutting or associative montage. Occasionally this fails, but more often than not, it works. And Cabaret was listed as the 30th best edited film of all time in a 2012 survey of members of the Motion Picture Editors Guild. So yeah, quite the achievement there. And finally, Ralph Burns won for his score adaptation and original song score. And best sound also went to Robert Knudsen and David Hildyard. Okay. And Cabaret also won Best Film at the British Academy of Film Awards. Also Best Director for Bob Fosse, actress Liza Minnelli. Marissa Berenson was nominated for Supporting Actress. Screenwriter J. Preston Allen was nominated once again. Jeffrey Unsworth won. The production design won, and the sound also won the BAFTAs as well. And then finally, most promising newcomer to leading film roles, Mr. Joel Grey. Yeah. And it also won Golden Globes for, motion picture, musical, or comedy, National Society of Film Critics Awards, the National Board of Review Awards. So, that's the thing. It really looks like this movie was really neck and neck with The Godfather all throughout 1972. Because you got to remember, Cabaret came out in February, and The Godfather came out a month later in March. So in 1972, these two movies were basically duking it out for not only the box office, but also for the Academy Awards ceremony. And while ultimately Cabaret got the most, it got 8, Godfather got Best Picture. And of course, when Godfather Part 2 came out, that alone got 6 Oscars for Robert De Niro for Best Supporting Actor. In fact, Joel Grey, who was interviewed several times on this Warner Brothers Blu-ray, he actually says several times that he was completely shocked that he was nominated. He said, look, I thought Al was going to win. Yeah, I think a lot of people thought that Al was going to win. So, So let me do a timestamp here real quick, see where we are. We are approximately 1 hour and 34 minutes in. 1 hour and 34 minutes in. So we have approximately a half hour left. I hope everybody is enjoying the movie and enjoying my commentary tonight. So we have approximately a half hour left to go. And here again, I mean, a lot of times at this point, I've exhausted everything I'm going to say about Cabaret, unfortunately. But yeah, because believe me, I'll be going to bed right after this commentary is over. Mm. But at any rate, I mean, anybody who's out there in the chat listening, please, say hi and let me know your feelings on Cabaret and everything. I'd be more than happy to share it with the audience here. Funny. The first thing I ever saw Liza Minnelli in when I was growing up was she had a cameo in the Muppets Take Manhattan, where Kermit the Frog had to go in disguise to this restaurant, which serves a lot of famous personalities, and he had to replace Liza Minnelli's picture with his own so that he can make people believe that he's a big hotshot Broadway producer to buy his buy his musical Manhattan Melodies. And the real Liza Minnelli comes in and looks around because she's wondering why her picture was replaced by a frog. Uh, and I was going to mention also, I mean, even though Joel Grey is not on screen right now, but on April 11th, Joel Grey will be turning 90 years old. And in fact, only a few years ago, um, he did a very successful run of Fiddler on the Roof. He actually directed a Yiddish version of Fiddler on the Roof, which was actually a success, and it won awards and everything. So he's directing in his 80s, which is astonishing, if you ask me. Yeah, he's going to be turning 90 on April 11th. I believe Michael York is still. I know Liza Minnelli is still with us. She's 75. I know Michael York. He did not sound well during the documentary on the Blu-ray, but he's still with us too. He turns 80 years old on March 27th. Yeah. So luckily, I mean, even though Bob Fosse passed away in 1987, um, all four of the leads of Cabaret are still with us. Yeah. After Minnelli kicked her drug abuse, she changed the line every time she about all the booze and liquor. Liz will not sing that. Oh, okay. Wow. So, as I said before, Cabaret came out in February of 1972, and it was essentially the most talked about film that came out at that time. And in fact, looking at February of 1972, there were practically no other films that came out during that month, except for second runs, re-releases and that kind of thing. And so everybody went to see Cabaret in February of '72. This was the film that everybody was going to see, and they were talking about, and up until when The Godfather came out in March. Although What's Up Doc came out on March 10th along with Silent Running. So those were the first two significant films that that took a month to come to the theaters after Cabaret came. So yeah. But like I said, this film, it did, like 42 million on a $14 million budget, which is astonishing, especially for a musical at that time. But the weird thing is, it didn't really revitalize the genre. I mean, it wasn't until really Chicago, ironically enough, another Bob Fosse production that actually rejuvenated the musical genre for the 21st century. Cabaret is one of my favorite movies. Thanks for inviting me to this. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure, Mr. Zook. Absolute pleasure. Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, it's great that I'm revisiting this movie after several years, and finally appreciate it fully as an adult now, because as a kid I was kind of just shaking my head throughout the whole thing. I just didn't really understand what was going on. What was all the I didn't understand anything about this movie when I saw it when I was young. I mean, even as sexy as Liza Minnelli was, even she didn't hold my attention. I hate to say, but no, this musical is definitely. I would be more than comfortable in putting this in my list of the top musicals, movie musicals of all time. I'd be more than comfortable with that. It's complex, it's dark, it's revolutionary in many ways. I mean, it broke the genre. It literally, like 2001: A Space Odyssey was to science fiction, this completely changed the musical genre forever. And you can see influences of Cabaret in so many modern day productions and movie musicals in particular. I mean, Cabaret was one of the most influential Broadway productions in history. And it's astonishing that the movie was able to be just as much of a success, even if a lot of stuff was changed and a lot of things were made different in terms of the film adaptation. This would be an exceptional study for, I think, drama students and theater students if they want to learn about, how to properly adapt a musical to the big screen without alienating non-musical fans. This is the way to do it. This is the template that anybody should follow, where you make the music realistic enough to where you believe that they are singing at that moment. And that's what the Kit Kat Club serves as um, a metaphor, a microcosm of what was going on in Berlin in 1931, and showcasing all of its decadence and like I said, just before collapse, literally right before collapse. Now, this is the number that Joel Grey cites as his favorite one in the entire picture, and I completely understand why. Um, as I said, there is a dark underlying theme of with this number, which comes to anti-Semitism. But at the same time, I mentioned this before, but at the same time, I literally thought for many years that this was an homage to 1932's Blonde Venus, with Marlene Dietrich doing that gorilla number and singing "Hot Voodoo" and everything. So, but the actress that's in this gorilla costume, she said that she lost a lot of weight wearing it, and that she had to endure rehearsals for this for weeks. I mean, you can only imagine what it was like. But I mean, you saw her earlier in the Mein Herr and other numbers, and here she is. Her last name is Quick. I forget her first name. Oh, her last name is Quick, but she's given a significant credit in the end credits and everything. And yeah, Joel Grey is really relishing every second on stage here, every single second. Let's see. Now this song. Just 1 second here. Bear with me. Yes, If You Could See Her. Yeah, that's the name of the song. And like I said, when this number ends, we basically have just the final dance number of Cabaret with Liza Minnelli and Joel Grey doing the finale. So, you know, I, you know, It's those earlier numbers like with Mine Hair and everything, where everything, all the movements are so suggestive, and now we have a number that really almost puts down the audience in a weird roundabout way, where you're not paying attention. It's really commenting, and it's commenting on everything, that everybody that's watching this, and how they're just they have their ears closed and their ears and eyes completely closed as to what's going on. But but yeah, I can only imagine what she had to endure during all those rehearsals in that gorilla suit. But I know Quick is her last name. I just forget what her first name was. The last line of that gorilla song is saying you wouldn't know. Yeah, pretty anti-Semitic. Yeah, I know, but here again, I mean, it was a warning. It was a warning by the writers and by to the audience, saying, "Hey, you're not paying attention. You're not paying attention." Oh man. Uh, so timestamp real quick. We are now at 1 hour 45 minutes and 30 seconds. 1 hour 45 and 30 seconds right now. So we have just about 18 minutes left. Now, I will say it again, that the ending to this movie, specifically the final shot, is without a doubt one of the most haunting and disturbing I've ever seen in a movie, let alone a musical. I mean, musicals by nature are supposed to end on happy notes. Um, this may be the first musical to not end. Well, granted, we had West Side Story, um, which did not end on a happy note. It ended on a sorrowful note. Um, but musicals, they all, they especially back then in the 50s and 60s, they were all about family friendly escapism. There is nothing escapist or family friendly about Cabaret at all. Like I said, Bob Fosse, he set out to make a very mature adult musical, which broke all the rules, invented some new ones, and ultimately became a classic. And I think a lot of these outdoor moments really reflect. I mean, Jeffrey Unsworth's cinematography is just luminous, luminous in these sequences. The Night of the Broken Glass is mentioned in Cabaret, but you could miss it if not paying attention. Yep. Like I said, it was a weird. What they cut out and what they put in was very interesting. As they here again, they were adhering to the whole notion of most of the songs will only be performed on the Kit Kat stage, except for that Nazi youth number, which here again was a massively chilling reminder as to what was brewing on outside of the Kit Kat Club. An absolute reminder of that. Yeah, it would have been amazing if Judy Garland was able to see her daughter win that Oscar in 1972. Yeah, it's a sad thing because, of course, Judy Garland never got an Oscar. I mean, she was nominated for A Star Is Born, but she didn't win. She lost to Grace Kelly in what is considered probably the biggest Oscar upset in history. It's still controversial to this day. Um, but for the record, I actually like Grace Kelly's performance in The Country Girl. I think it actually does challenge even Judy Garland, even. I mean, I'll tell all Stars Born as fans. If you're a fan of Stars Born and you love Judy Garland, just check out The Country Girl with Grace Kelly sometime. It's a really good movie. Really good movie. So we're pretty much about here to the climactic number of which is called Cabaret, and Liza Minnelli is going to give a dynamite final hurrah here. As Cabaret is going to come to a close with this dynamite musical number with a few hard cuts. I mean, here again, Fosse, he wasn't primarily concerned about capturing every note and every angle of the musical numbers because he had other fish to fry. He had other things that he wanted to do and say with Cabaret. But this is a very, I guess, satisfying conclusion to their relationship. Even though here again, I mean, we know that they're never going to be together as a couple, particularly after 1931. I mentioned earlier with that movie Modkin in Uniform, which is the lesbian um, scenario set in the all-girl boarding school. It's chilling watching that movie now because a lot of the extras and a lot of the cast and crew they went to the gas chambers. They were victims of the Holocaust, and most of them had died um, because a lot of them didn't leave Germany at that time. So with this film, you can almost imagine the same thing. I mean, you can just everybody in the background. If they weren't able to escape Germany, they probably died in a concentration camp. It's a very sad, you know, man. I wonder, people watching this now in 2022, if they think that this film would have a lot of parallels to what we are now dealing with now in the United States. I mean, I don't, here again, I don't want to get too political here, and I didn't want to go too incendiary about what's going on, what's going on right now in terms of the rise of fascism and other corporate forms nowadays. But it's not hard. I mean, I mean, when you watch this movie, it's not that hard to think about what's been going on in certain places and corners of the country in terms of anti-Semitism and fascism being accepted. I mean, there have been parents that have been calling for the burning of books. That's a bad sign. That's a bad sign. I don't care. I don't care what anybody says. It's a sign that it's so alarming that why people are not talking about it more is unbelievable. And that's the thing. The German people, they were conditioned to deal with they were conditioned to accept everything that the Nazi party did to them. They had the brown shirts that roughed them up, and the taking away of women's rights, taking away of abortion and protecting women's bodies and everything. This is all happening right now. And, Cabaret, even though it's set in Berlin in 1931, I mean, there are parallels to, the United States of 2022. Just saying. And here again, I didn't want to go too in depth into this and too incendiary, but at the same time, it's almost impossible not to notice. It really is not impossible to notice. And it should be noted that, of course, abortion has always been a controversial topic in the history of cinema. I mean, it really started in 1916 when Lois Weber, the most famous women director of that time, she was making movies for Universal. She put out a movie called Where Are My Children, which focused on birth control and abortion and just and the patriarchy that was inherent at the time. And that movie became a smash hit, but it was also, of course, very, very controversial. You know, it was picketed at theaters, it was played at, and Lois Weber, apparently the movie was so successful that she even made a sequel called The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. Um, in the pre-code era, there were a few movies that alluded to abortion. The most significant probably being Men in White, which is a 1934 film from MGM starring Clark Gable and Myrna Loy. And in that film, Clark Gable works as a doctor, and this woman that he impregnates, and there's this botched abortion, and now she's about to die because of this botched abortion. Um, Literally only a few weeks before the production code in 1934 finally put a stamp on films to say, okay, you will not release any films until you release it through us or whatever. MGM had to eliminate certain lines of dialogue to where it was ambiguous. But at the same time, when you see the movie today, yeah, you can kind of see, you can definitely, there's like one or two words that give it away that this is a botched abortion, but it doesn't outright say that that's exactly what happened. But here again, another controversial topic for 1972. And here again, this was only a few years after the production code finally dwindled to nothing, and they had the Motion Picture Association of America, come in and everything to essentially censor movies for the next 40 years by pretending to be on the side of parents and putting these stupid ratings on the movies. But nowadays, with streaming and everything, the MPAA is now practically obsolete and they're meaningless in a world of streaming, just the way it is. And justifiably, I think so. Let's see. We are at 1 hour and 56 minutes. So we are in the home stretch here. 7 more minutes of the movie are left, which is basically going to be the final Cabaret production number and the closing by Joel Grey, as well as that legendary final shot. Oh yeah, I love the fingernails. I love the green on the fingernails. Yeah, Liza Minnelli is just irresistible in this movie. Irresistible. Well, in Sweet Charity, I mean, Shirley MacLaine ended up not getting married to kind of a cad that probably would have made her life hell. So in that instance, with this film, he's also giving the leading lady her independence, I guess you could say. But yeah, this is also one of the most famous numbers from the movie, and a great showstopper to bring the movie to a close. Here again, I mean, imagine watching this in 1972. Just imagine for a moment. You know, musicals are pretty much dead. Nobody is really going to see them anymore because of the friendly aspects, the sentimentality of movies like Sound of Music and everything. Nobody was going to the theater to see the musicals anymore, and this was something that, while it was a musical on the surface, it really had a much bigger agenda. And Bob Fosse, he wanted to comment on a society that wasn't listening, that wasn't paying attention, that was about to fall into the most evil of regimes that would alter the country forever and basically destroy its reputation. But no, I mean, just watch the show. It's all going to be fine. Just watch the show. You know what I'm saying? Damn, the lighting on Liza in this final sequence is just oh, it's amazing. So even though Cabaret ends with this musical number that is basically a showstopper. The button that he puts on it with the the Nazis that you can see in the distorted mirrors and everything is just absolutely chilling, and it's a reminder that, hey, pay attention. Pay attention to who is coming out of the woodwork, the political woodworks, to take away people's freedoms, to condemn anybody that has a different point of view, that doesn't have the same religious values as somebody else. I mean, it's just horrible. And I hate to say that. I do think it's happening right now in America. Um, Maybe it's more obvious to me than others. I don't know. I mean, from what I can see, it really looks like there's this looming fascist threat that nobody has pounced on yet. Um, I'm not somebody who takes sides politically. I'm not somebody who likes to get involved, because I know that the whole machine is almost like an illusion. We do not have freedom of choice. We have owners, and they own us. Yeah, I find it. I don't know if I like this number or Mine Hair more. I mean, I really love Mine Hair with the outfit that she wears, but the purple is also, yeah. And here, the final show-stopping moment of one of the great movie musicals of the 20th century, Bob Fosse's Cabaret, and Joel Grey is here to make his closing to the audience. Here again, looking directly in the camera. He's looking directly in the camera, speaking to the audience, saying, "Good night, thank you for coming." And we have probably the most chilling of any musical ending, or any ending to a musical. Oh, yeah, that jazz, just wonderful. Yeah, this is a soundtrack I can listen to all day. It's wonderful. Everybody's still watching, everybody's still enjoying. The show is going on, and yet there's okay, Joel Grey is making his exit right now as the master of ceremonies. He bows to the audience, the lights grow dim, and the camera shifts off to the right with a spotlight on it. The spotlight goes away, and then we see in the audience Nazis just watching. They have infiltrated the audience. They have infiltrated Berlin, and they are about to destroy their city's reputation and the country's reputation, all within just 10 years. Very, very chilling. And on top of all that, no music during the end credits. Name another musical that has no music over the end credits. That's a first. At least for me, that's a first. But yeah, here we have all the credits. The Kit Kat dancers. Louise Quick, that was her name. Louise Quick. She was in the gorilla outfit. Costume designer Charlotte Fleming, production designer Rolf Zeitbauer. Yeah, I mean, huge applause to the production and the costumers, and the cinematography, of course. I mean, on a technical level, uh, Cabaret is brilliant. But I also think from a story perspective that it also has irresistible characters, irresistible musical numbers, filmed on location in West Berlin and Munich, West Germany. So that is the conclusion of Bob Fosse's Cabaret. I want to thank everybody for joining me tonight. And even though I can't officially announce which movie I will be doing next, I can safely say that every Saturday night I will be able to do a new one at 10 p.m. Eastern Time for pretty much the rest of 2022. We should be doing commentaries every Saturday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, at any rate, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you, everybody in the chat. Mr. Zook's Twilight Days, and Daniel Shine. Thank you so much for joining us and everything. And looking forward to for you all joining me on the next commentary. And like I said, get this Blu-ray before it sells out. Physical media may be going away in the next few years. This is a Blu-ray that anybody would want to own. It has so many extra features. The picture and sound quality are superlative. And if you're a fan of the movie, you really should pick this up. So at any rate, thank you so much for joining me. You all have a good night and peace out. Take care. Thank you.